Ember NYC and are good friends of mine. So if you find yourself in need of an Agile consultancy to work with you on Rails, iOS, Spring, you name it, there are awesome teams. Or if you find yourself wanting to join a team in an environment where you can do pair programming, you can learn Agile from some of the best in the business, you would do well to talk to them. So thank you to them, and thank you also to our other sponsors, Simple Reach, Movable Ink, who host our Hacker Hours events. And in particular, a quick congratulations to Simple Reach, who was in TechCrunch a couple of days ago for raising a $9 million fundraising round. Woo! There's going to be a lot of Ember developed with that $9 million, I'm sure. And then I also want to say thank you to the sponsor of an event that we had earlier this week. On Monday and Tuesday, a group of 40 folks, combination of Ember core team members and folks in the community selected by lottery, got together out in the Hamptons at an event sponsored by a community member of our community called Plythe, a startup here in New York. For those of you who were there, thanks for coming. For those of you who couldn't join us, I hope that you can join us the next time we do it. It was an incredible time. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to cover on this front. Did that. The next event, our next meetup is going to be the 4th Thursday in August. It is up on Meetup for RSVP already. We are looking for talks for that event. So if you have something that you'd like to share with the community, please get in touch with me. As you'll see from some of the first few talks, giving a quick lightning talk that's an experience report of what your experience has been working with Ember, at your organization on your project is a great talk to give. It's lots of kind of hard lessons learned, war stories, tips for the folks who are maybe following a few footsteps behind, and that's what our first talk is going to be, so you'll get a sense of that format. Before we jump into our talks, though, I want to just open up the floor to announcements from the community. This might be folks who are looking for a job as an Ember developer, people who are looking to hire Ember developers, other events that you might be organizing that are relevant to this group. So either come up to the front or raise your hand, and we'll run a mic to you if you would like to share with you. Any announcements? Go over here, Frank.
Thanks, Luke. Hello, everybody. My name is Frank Carmody. Just really quick, I lead the digital recruitment efforts for McGraw-Hill Education, very close, just uptown on 34th Street. And I'm just here to learn about Ember today. So I don't know anything about it. Kind of funny for leading the whole digital group there, believe it or not. So I'm just here mostly as an observer today, but we are hiring aggressively, and we're looking for several senior UI developers to help really build out our digital group in New York. We're doing some incredible things in terms of digital education and adaptive learning. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please come up afterwards, and love to chat with you. And if there's some things around Ember that I should definitely know, please let me know. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Any other announcements?
Hi, my name's Jonathan. I'm on the web apps team at Heroku. We're hiring right now. We do a lot of Ember, although it's relatively recent, last 6 months or so, and Node and Rails. So if you do any combination of those three things, we should talk. We're remote. I live here, and I work for them, and they're in California. So if you want to be remote, that's cool too. All right, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Other announcements? Ryan Toronto, are you around? Did you want to say anything? Ryan came up to me earlier and said, hey, we're hiring. Do you have any tips? So my tip is tell people.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Ryan Toronto. I work for TED.com. We're an Ember shop, and we're looking for Ember devs. So come talk to me after.
Thanks, Ryan. TED Talks are awesome, and I'm sure working with Ryan, I know actually that working with Ryan would be awesome too. So, all right, with that, anything else before we move on? Going once, twice. Our first speakers are one of them has been a member of the Ember community here in New York for as long as I can remember. When was your first meeting, Constantine? Right. So the original, I inherited this meetup from the Sprout Core NYC group, and in the beginning it was the Sprout Core / Ember meetup, and after a while it became clear that it should be the Ember meetup. But yeah, Constantine has been there since the beginning. Down in Mint Digital. Yeah, so that was the very first one. So as long as Ember NYC has existed, Constantine's been part of it, and he's recently joined Blue Apron, where he's working with Ryan Bright. Is that right? And they are here to tell us about their experiences working with Ember. So please join me in welcoming Constantine and Ryan.
So I'm Ryan. This is Constantine. I've been a part of Blue Apron for about, say, 9 months now. And we recently started using Ember, I guess, back in January or February. So we're, at this point, feeling more seasoned with it, and we've kind of developed a lot of both things that we've learned from utilizing the framework and things that we're hoping to change, and things we're hoping the framework will also change to help better support kind of what we're doing. To give you a little brief overview about what Blue Apron is, we're a meal subscription service that allows people to sign up for weekly subscriptions. We're currently shipping about 700,000 meals a month. So we're kind of handling higher volumes of data at this point. And we've grown our engineering team from about 3 or 4 when we first started using Ember to now at 12. So we're able to kind of scale out what we're building, and that will be more important as we go along, talking about how Ember and its conventions have really helped us be able to build out our different products as we built our team as well. So kind of a brief overview about what we're using and where we started. Ember Rails, which we kind of chose because Ember CLI wasn't a thing when we started using it. Now we're starting to build our newer tools with Ember CLI. Ember Data was in a different place, 6 months ago than it is now, but we still took the risk, and it's actually worked out pretty well. CoffeeScript is something we're moving away from, and then and then Teaspoon, because we're using Ember Rails. That's just kind of a brief overview of our environment today. So picture dots showing up. So before May 19th, Ember Data was self-proclaimed as not ready for production. We decided to use it anyways. After May 19th, even though there have only been a handful of changes in the beta since then, they're now saying, oh, it's being used by many companies in production, and that's true. Like it's worked out really well for us with some caveats, but overall it's been a good experience. Okay, so some of those caveats. Batch updating in general isn't something that Ember Data handles nicely, though the way we're doing batch updating today requires just a lot of HTTP requests or kind of going against the conventions that Ember Data sets. And this is actually something that's specified at the JSON API level, something that Steve might talk about a little bit later. So to go in an example of something we're doing in our application that requires this, we allow our customer service representatives to be able to quickly act on customer support requests either by phone or by email, and to record the types of issues they're encountering. Like, as you see here, we can choose different recipes, what happened in those recipes, and quickly iterate through and log issues against specific orders. So to do this, we're actually generating an HTTP request for each of these recipe issues. It's not ideal. Obviously, we'd like to be able to batch update all of these. We can do that, but the way that the API spec specifies to do that is all or nothing. We really want to be able to save these individually and display validation errors whenever something occurs, but something that's not handled super easily today. The way we're getting around this now is to really create a safe queue to where we're starting with our parent object, and then when the promise resolves, we're then going through each of the child objects and updating those sequentially. If any errors occur, then we report those back to the user. And yeah, so the obvious problem there is the implementation's a little weird. Like we have a queue object, it's got to live somewhere. Right now it lives in a parent, which is kind of strange. It's not something that is intuitive to developers that are not familiar with this pattern. That said, it allows us to do partial updating, but it also generates a lot of HTTP requests. So if you've got a system that's logging, say, 70 to 100 items, this just really falls over. And to that note, Konstantin is going to talk a little bit about that.
So another thing nested attributes. Oh, you want me to talk about this? Okay. Sure. One way that I attempted to implement this was to do something similar to what Rails does, where you kind of nest your children or your dependent attributes in like a nested form. It kind of worked, but the problem is you now have to kind of have this contract between the server and Ember data, so that you're like passing up an array of children, and that has to be the exact same order that the server kind of returns to you the success or failure of those children. So that's kind of a little unintuitive, and it does get you the single request, and you can use all the Rails helpers and everything for processing your request, but it does kind of have this weird dependency that gets introduced. Another thing, Ember data pagination. So another part of our app, here's an example of like a recipe that we had, the lamb burger. Actually, very delicious recipe. You can see all the reviews that users are like posting basically for the recipe. And the way we kind of render that right now, we have the application controller, then we have the recipes controller, which is responsible for the title and the little description, and then the recipe ratings controller, which kind of renders the tab format you can see here, and you would have the same thing for recipe basics, tips and technique, etc., etc. But the problem is recipes don't have like 5 ratings; they have tons of ratings, right? And what happens is with Ember data, we're lazily loading the recipe ratings with this links helper. I don't know if you guys see this, but we're using async true, so when you actually do a get on recipe ratings, it'll go and fetch this in Ember data. So that's what this down here is doing. Let's just stare at that code for a little bit. So what happens if there's a ton of ratings, right? So there's kind of 2 approaches. One that I thought of is to kind of decouple the fact that recipe ratings are part of recipe, because has many relationships are really hard to paginate in Ember data right now. So you can kind of decouple it and return the recipe rating and not use the relationship here. And then for like a simple example here, the go-to page can just be in the controller, and you can just reset the content, and you can do like a stored.find and pass the page ID. If you want, obviously to be able to do this in the router would be a better way, so you can actually get the params. I think Discourse does this with like / the number, or you can do like page : the number maybe as a parameter. But the second approach that was Yehuda Katz kind of mentioned as a way that he prefers, and I like this approach as well, is to be able to kind of do this reconfigure on the association, and then it would basically pass it to find has many, and then you'd be able to paginate that way. So it would be really natural feeling and more like what we have in this example, where you can just basically get recipe ratings and then reconfigure it. to go to the next page. And then future challenges. Oh boy. So right now we do have like our entire admin section is kind of one gigantic Ember application, which is okay for now. But as we build more and more products out, we need to start, I guess, understanding how to better architect this. Is it going to be different projects? Is it going to be, you know, modules with ES6 and namespacing? You know, do we want to load all of the data for the user page if we're not using it in the recipe tool, for instance? Hopefully some of that stuff will happen with Ember CLI. Stefan? But and of course we're kind of, as Ryan mentioned, we started another application now with Ember CLI, so we're kind of moving away from CoffeeScript, and this is the application architecture right now. We have like the customer-facing end of Blue Apron, which doesn't use any Ember at all, and that's simply because we need to support, unfortunately, IE 7 and above. We actually have a lot of customers converting from IE 7, so we can't blow them off and tell them to upgrade. And then we have like our tools, this tools is what we have kind of in Ember right now. It's like the admin area, and then our warehouse management system, which is going to be our newest product. We're just starting to build this. This is all going to be an Ember CLI, and hopefully we'll transition the admin area over to Ember CLI as well. Team reception. Want to talk about that?
Yeah, so like I said, we've been using Ember for about 6 months. It started out with just me kind of leading the charge, and we've slowly introduced more and more people to the framework. A lot of these were traditionally Rails developers that didn't necessarily have tons of JavaScript experience, so it wasn't just we're introducing you to a new JavaScript MVC framework, you've used Backbone or Knockout or whatever. This is like a totally new paradigm. And coming from Rails, with Ember, there are a lot of common terminology that doesn't necessarily translate to the same thing. A view in Rails is not a view in Ember, so on and so forth. So like one of the struggles that one of our developers mentioned was when he first started, he didn't know where to put stuff. It's like, all right, I'm trying to do this function. Do I put in a controller? Do I put in a model? Seems not the right place because that's kind of the same thing. Maybe what is a route? So just like building the terminology and kind of that lexicon for what things mean was not necessarily a huge challenge, but just one of the hurdles that people had to overcome. But as we've gotten more and more familiar with it, we're able to move a lot quicker on executing things because we've defined these conventions, or sorry, Ember's defined these conventions. We don't have to define ourselves. We have to think about, you know, certain bits of architecture, but there's a lot that's just taken care of for us based on the philosophy of the framework itself. So that's, you know, that's something that was preached at EmberConf, and it's preached about Ember a lot, and we can kind of speak to the truth of it. Yeah, and as everyone else, we're hiring primarily Ember and Rails developers, and also for user experience positions, designers.
Thanks, guys. We got time for one question for Constantine and Ryan. If anybody has anything they want to ask, right here in the back. Let me run a mic. 1 sec.
Yeah, just thinking about the updates and the stuff you're dealing with. Have you guys thought about including, not to throw a wrench in the works, but WebSockets as a way of kind of getting an interaction, getting some data back from the server, and then updating the DOM so that you don't have to deal with a lot of the challenges around the pagination and so forth?
So as far as WebSockets and like automatic updating as we're like moving through the page, we've kind of decided against that from more of a business level. Like there are not a ton of people that are working in the same view at the same time, and we want people to be really sure when they're entering data that it's what they meant to do, not like typing through, entering descriptions, selecting fields, and things are automatically being sent to the server. There's actually validations on a lot of our products so that people can go through and make sure that, this is what I meant to do, because when they say place an order, we don't want that to be something that's just handled behind the scenes and there might be an error. It's something that the user needs to be very aware of. So we've consciously decided against using like a lot of automatic updating.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate you sharing. So I mentioned earlier this evening that all but 2 of the Ember NYC events have been at Pivotal Labs, and one of them, a memorable event, was at the offices of the creator of the application we're about to see a demo of, and I am excited to introduce to you another longtime member of the Ember NYC community, Gaurav Munjal.
Hello, everyone. Okay, Booker Software is a platform, a software as a service platform for service-based businesses to allow them to run their entire business online. That includes booking appointments. It includes promoting to customers. It includes selling not only the appointments but any other products they may have, and also to manage their inventory and their employees. So it's a huge platform. It has a lot of moving parts, and one of the hardest parts of working with Booker software has been setting up Booker, because we have a lot of settings, and traditionally we actually employed a large army of implementation specialists who would set up accounts for our customers, and in order to scale our business, we're looking for a way to make it possible for the smaller customers, the ones that don't need all the complexity, to get on board themselves. Before I start showing you the app, I just wanted to make the usual appeal. We are a very fast-growing company. We have a lot of job openings, including front-end web developers. So please apply if you're interested. Anyway. So, this is what our newest customers will first receive an email, and that email will direct them to our website, and they'll see, if this is a company called New Dance Moves, they will see this page and they will be introduced to our app. And I'm going to move through this quickly since this is a lightning talk. We have a model introducing herself as a avatar guide to help you through the onboarding process, and she explains to you throughout the entire process what Booker is about, what the various concepts are, and how to get through them. Now, Booker's, with the onboarding app, we're mainly concerned about 4 core items that you need to get yourself online in our system, and those are telling us your hours of operations, who your employees are, what services you sell, and a slightly difficult to understand concept called rooms, which is basically where your business happens. The first thing we do is initially allow you to set up your password. Now, this is actually not what is really happening behind the scenes. When you got your email, you actually logged in. You didn't know that, but you did. And you're actually already in our system with your administration privileges to your own account. But you don't actually know your own username and password yet. We never sent them to you. So we actually let you change your password and through this interface. And we ask you to use your email as your username just for simplicity. And then we ask you to enter your password. Now we have very strict password requirements because we are taking businesses. We offer merchant accounts, and these are point of sale applications. So we don't want the situation where somebody else gets access to your account and steals all your customers' money. So sorry. At that point, when you signed up for us, you already gave us a bunch of information about your business. So some of this information's already filled in. But we don't assume that you're actually the person who signed our contract. You could be, the person who signed the contract may have forwarded this email to their actual day-to-day reservation is to set up the system. So that's why we leave some of these fields blank, that we actually have a good idea what you know already. Now, one of the things I'm going to focus on through this exercise, I'm going to be showing you some of the components we use. This is a completely unnecessarily prettied up drop-down box that's not the standard one. And I'll be showing you how we created that. The hours of operations is a screen developed by one of our designers. His name is Luigi, and he really came up with a way to make it possible to set up your hours of operation in an easy to understand way. Our previous design involved a lot of drop downs. I'm just going to assume you're closed on Monday and continue with normal 9 to 6 hours. So we actually give you a lot of positive feedback throughout the application. Now, when you first show up, we actually have you the first person who was originally created the account as the spa administrator already filled in. But if that's not you, you're supposed to actually change this information and make it you. But I'm just not going to do that right now, because I want to get through this quickly as possible. We can then add myself as a second employee. By the way, this application was largely conceived of and designed by a person named Sean Chittle, who is no longer with our company, but it was a fantastic designer and really understands how to make a user-friendly interface. Now, assuming we're done adding employees, we then move on to services, which are the kinds of things that a dance company might actually be using. So, for example, a dance studio might have a one-on-one training. At a price of $100 for a period of 30 minutes. And these spin boxes, by the way, are may not look familiar to you, but they're really based on jQuery UI, just styled aggressively. This is a draggable toggle switch component, which I'm gonna actually show you some of the code for, but it's functionally just a checkbox, but it's actually draggable like this, and it looks kind of like the iPhone style. And this is a multiple selection component, which replaces a select multiple widget with something that looks better. And we've also found that users really don't understand how to use a select multiple widget, no matter how often they've seen it on the web. So anyway, I'm gonna really just power through this very quickly. Rooms in Booker are the location of your business. So for a dance studio, their classroom might actually be a room. And it might be the only room they have. So they might be able to fit 20 people in that room. And at this point, I've only created one service, so I'm going to select that. You'll notice these all in none buttons here that sort of help you out if you add a whole lot of these. And when you're done adding rooms, we show you a beautiful congratulations screen. We remind you of your account name and your username in an attempt to help you get past the next part, which is when you go back to Booker, you have to enter your account information again. And that's basically what the onboarding wizard looks like. Now I'm going to start with the draggable toggle switch component for the code explanation part of this. So a component is sort of like an attempt to encapsulate any kind of functionality as a single element that you can then use in your template. So this you can imagine to be something equivalent to an HTML tag, and it has attributes and it has an element. Only since we're using the handlebars templating tablets, we have nice curly braces for those of you who are not that familiar with Ember. Use ID will allow us to add a different ID to every toggle button in our application so that we don't have to worry about having them all with the same ID. You can specify all kinds of other attributes, and off-label and on-label just replace some text in the code. So does the text over here. The switch state is more interesting. This actually binds to an element in your control. It binds a property in your component to a property in the outside controller. Now the actual when Handlebars sees the component, it replaces the HTML with all of this, and you notice there's actually a nested component inside, which is just Ember's checkbox. Now, the thing to realize with this is that we have actions directly mapped to the outside component. We have the IDs mapped using bind attribute. We have checked mapped using switch state, so that because switch state is bound by the outer template to the state variable in our controller, that's the checked state of this input checkbox is actually going to be the state reflected in the state variable of our controller. We don't actually need any routes because I'm just showing off a component. With this component, almost all the work is really in the CSS to make it look pretty, including all kinds of wonderful animated transitions. So switch state changed is really all about initiating the jQuery draggable object. Every time switch state changes, it's going to call this function because of the observed switch state at the bottom here. And we're also going to call it when the element is first inserted. Those of you who watched Olivia's wonderful presentation on the run loop might remember that you have to wait until after rendering in order to put jQuery actions on any kind of component you have. We use a closure to grab the this and the state. Other than that, it's fairly straightforward. We're using jQuery UI's draggable component all the way through. We're calculating the width, changing the CSS again and again. We are disabling and re-enabling the transition during the drag, and that's most of it. The next thing I'll show you is this wonderful single button drop down component, which is just like a regular select switch. It has the ability to, if I had not done that first, it has the ability to indicate that you haven't selected an element, and it's we have a bunch of properties on our component when we define it in our template. Now, what I do here is I actually let you define the property of the array of objects that you want to use in your component to name your button and your menu, so that this is what you want to do when you're writing your component. You want to make them a little bit extensible so that you use them in different parts of your application. And the way I allow that to happen easily is I created a little helper here called indirect. I've seen a bunch of ways to do this online to enable you to to bind to a particular property in your controller and keep it up to date. I saw a very complicated blog post on how to use observers to do this. I saw a much simpler solution in the discuss.ember.js.org, but I found a much simpler solution myself, which was to create a little bound helper that just indirectly refers to the key. And that saves, it's very simple and easy to understand how it works, because it just takes the key as a string and looks it up in the object. And other than that, this component is very much not complicated. This is a little more complicated of a component. You've noticed this in the top right of the wizard, and it allows us to show the progress of our person through the wizard. So the actual template is very straightforward. You tell it the number of steps, what the last completed step is, and the start of next step. But you have to actually fill in these variables somehow, and they're going to be different on every single page of your application. So how do we do that? Well, we want these properties to be defined on the route, but this is going to look in the application controller for the properties. So the way I hook that up is in the application controller I defined the names of the steps and dummy values for the last completed step and the started next step. And in a mix-in, I actually allow the allow the in the setup controller hook to pass pass that information from the route to the application controller. For those of you who've never seen the evented route mix-in, the evented mix-in, it basically lets you turn any hook into a real event, so that instead of having a single method on that event, you could have many. And lastly, we define our component here, and it creates a computed property called steps, which actually takes the last completed step and started next step properties and defines for every single route the step number, the current step, the step that's been, whether the step has been started and whether the step has been completed, because Ember requires, the handlebars requires simple yes/no properties. You can't really do any logic in your handlebars. And lastly, once you've done this all setup, all you have to do is specify in your route what was the last completed step and whether you've started the next one. Okay, and the rest, of course, is a whole lot of CSS. The multiple selection component will allow you to select various colors, select them all, select none. In order to handle this, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. Ember hasn't really come up with a good solution of its own to handle the select component, so you don't really get a lot of guidance there. What I ended up doing was my contract for the component is that the controller will pass it an array controller containing in its model the array containing all the items in the select box, and each of the and it will specify an item controller for each of those, which will incorporate my own built-in mix-in, the panel multi-select mix-in, which will actually create an isSelected property and toggle it when it's selected. And that's the general solution I created. I know I went a little fast, but this was a lightning talk. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to come by and talk to me about this. I'm very happy to try to take the time to explain it to you. If we have time for questions at all?
Fine, Garb, will you be out after as well? All right, so Garb, during or after, thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, I do have a quick question for you. Actually, two questions. One is, do you know if there's any plans to open source any of the components that you showed?
I did specifically ask for permission to open source these components, and my CTO took some time to try to decide whether to do that or not, and never got back to me.
And then also a question for the app that you showed us, just so for folks to have a sense in the audience about how many developers and how long did it take to implement?
So I was pretty much the only developer on this app, and it took about 3 months.
Awesome, cool, thanks again.
External APIs, it records the requests and returns them, and so specifically for testing. So when you're doing your tests, you can record them against a live external server, and then play those cassettes whenever you run your tests. So you don't have those kind of very long request times to go back to things. So in Ember, when you're setting up tests and you want to do the test, you'll start out with, using fixtures to do things and kind of make up your own responses as you're going. I don't know how, yeah, that's big enough. But SimpleReach is an application. If I reload it now, you can see here in the network requests just the sheer number of requests that go back to the server. And if you think of Ember as a technology, it'll have by default far more requests to an external service than a Rails app would, because every bit of data that is coming into the app is coming from somewhere else. So you'll have a lot of these coming in. And if you look at any given one of these, at least for our app, because it's analytics and because there's lots of numbers, we have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of JSON. So setting up fixtures for this becomes unmanageable quite quickly. So you have VCR. It works, but again, if the configuration is very much around actual testing applications. So I tried at first to hack that into using it for our Ember app, but that didn't work so well. But so we came into the ability to use something called mock builder. So with SimpleReach, what we can actually do is we can take this gem called mock builder, which essentially takes this piece of Chrome here. So if you look at Chrome in your network requests, let's try to make this bigger. Whenever you load a page, it's going to show you what your network requests were. And then if I go somewhere else, it'll continue to bring those requests through, and you can see them all load. But if you right-click, you'll see this thing that says Save as HAR with content. And that'll actually save down a recording of every single network request that's happened in that session since you opened it. So I can sit here for 10 minutes and all of my polling will come through. I can go to anywhere in the site I want, and it'll actually save down every single one of those requests. So I can save down this RAHAR now, and it'll have that. And then someone built a small gem called a small NPM module called mock builder, which I forked, and that essentially takes these HAR objects, which is all the stuff that's been recorded in the browser, and turns them into something that you can use in sign-on for AJAX mocking. So what it'll look like is it'll take something like this, which is the HAR file that comes back with all the stuff that you wouldn't really need if you were building your app, and turns it into something more like this. So it'll kind of give you this nice JavaScript object that you could use to then do things with. So the way that we were able to build this into our app is that now we can run around our app, click on anything we want, save down that HAR, and then use mock builder to convert those. And then once you have that, you have these kind of simple, we just use sign-on. This is very, very basic sign-on code that just builds this fake server, and then will respond with whenever it finds an object that matches the request that comes through. It'll just respond with that object instead of sending it through the server. And then you can actually set it up to either fail if it gets something that isn't saved, or to just pass it through and actually request that. And then for us, we have the Rails thing doing the compiling, and so all we need to do is have this fixtures file that includes the sign-on server, and then a folder for which we can put these recordings that we had of the HARs all the way through. So let's go through an example of actually doing this. So if I refresh this page, I can go here, see the requests as they come through. Go back to an actual page. And you'll see the requests come as they're pending. We have a lot of data through, so sometimes it loads a little slower. But so once we have that, I can again save as HAR. And then, so I can now save this into my folder. So if I go to the actual mock builder application, big enough. So once you have mock builder set up, you can just run it with grunt. and it sits and waits. So with this, if I now save it into the mock builder horrors folder and save it, do it, you'll see that my grunt task actually ran that. And then it'll output it. And one of the things that I did was I modified it so that you can set up the URL. So when those horrors come in, they have a default URL. But what sign-on expects is to have a relative path. So you can set up the URL that you think you're going from, and it'll replace that with the relative path, as well as you can decide where you want to output it. So you can set up in the configuration file where your actual application is and where it expects those files to be, those JavaScript objects, and it'll just magically put those into that place for you. So once you have that going, it just outputs those, and that's it. And now you have your recording set up. And so if you look now at this kind of same example, this is a demo site, and you'll see as I refresh, and the same thing, we have no network requests that come through there. Go again to this one here, and you'll see that once you've got it set up, those network requests go away completely. And so for us, it's been great for testing, because whenever we change our internal API, before we had to completely rewrite all our fixtures, or we were using mockjacks before and had to still, even if we were saving down these JavaScript things, every time we had to, we just want to decide, split the way our data was accessed differently, we'd have to redo all of them. Now we can just click through the site a few times, save that down, and it works. So that's been really nice and just made us want to test and do these acceptance and integration tests more. The other advantage that has really been for demoing. So whenever we have our CEO or our sales team go out and give demos to people, they kind of have these several things that will always come up against. They'll have either a bad Wi-Fi connection where they are. There may be a regression that's been introduced, and they'll find it about 5 minutes before they actually do the demo, and we won't have time to fix it. Or maybe something's going on and servers are melting and things are really slow. And for all those situations, having a demo app up where it's clicked around and it can act and behave just like the real app, except not actually hitting the servers when it loads, they're able to do their full thing with very little effort. And having these recordings helps us test easier. So it gives us this double win of really having these recordings of what the app will look like, makes our demos faster and quicker and smoother, and with a little bit of response time, if you can see, it kind of still pretends using sign-on to have a response time, but at the same time, it's pre-calculated response time versus if things are going badly and things are loading slowly. So it helps us do both those things. So yeah, to be able to do it, as I say, it's sign-on plus Chrome plus mock builder, and you very quickly can have all of your fixtures set up with just a couple of clicks around your site and your app. That's it.
Awesome. We've got time for one question for Andre.
In that HAR file that's saved, it saves every single asset, whether it's like an image or a video or an MP3 or whatever. I'm assuming it like base64 encodes it and sticks it in there. Like how does it deal with things that aren't text?
For those, we don't really worry about them. Like it'll save the binary for those, and so we just ignore those a lot of the time as well. We don't the sign-on doesn't worry about those requests. It just ignores those requests. So they might be there, but it's still going to actually query the assets if it's actually loading those. So if we have our local service set up, when those assets, most of the time will be local assets. They won't be kind of going out into the cloud to learn something to get them back. So we'll serve those up in our integration tests and our acceptance tests.
Very cool stuff. Thanks, Andre. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to do one more lightning talk. We're going to take a quick stretch break, and then we're going to bring Steve up. So our next speaker was a late addition to the lineup, and we were technically full already, but this gentleman is in New York for just a short time. He was actually formerly the organizer of the the Ember meetup in Brussels, and is now working for a Boston-based startup. And he's going to tell us a little bit about how he and his team do integration testing there at the startup in Boston history. So I'm very happy to introduce Joran Brunsima.
Perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. So thanks for the introduction, Luke, and thanks for letting me talk here, although it was very late. So a bit about me. So I'm CTO of History. So we're an early stage Boston-based company, although originally from Belgium. So we are in the education technology space, and we create an application that aims to captivate students in the studies of history for K-12 education. So think about Paul Revere having a smartphone on his horse and tweeting during his famous midnight ride, or Napoleon and Wellington having a Twitter conversation while fighting each other in Waterloo. That's the approach we take to history to make it more engaging and fun for kids. Yeah, so as he said, okay. All right, so is that it? Is that good? Okay. So also organizer of the Brussels meetups. You didn't like it? Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, we're a very small community, average of like 6 people, so it's great to see people standing because there's not enough room. It's awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about integration testing. So actually, it's very related to what Andre was talking about, but take a different approach. So Andre was talking about mocking all the AJAX requests to make them go faster. But history, we go from the philosophy that for integration tests, we want to test how your front end integrates with your back end. So actually test the whole stack, so we don't do any mocking. And integration tests, you're gonna test from the user's perspective. So it's just gonna see like how the user interacts when he goes to pages, clicks on buttons, what happens, what he sees. So back in the old days, this was driven by your backend. So when you didn't have a clear separation between your front end, Ember, and your backend, something else, everything was done by a backend. That's how we were testing our application. So we had a Rails backend with an Ember front end, and we tested our application using Capybara, which was very stupid because those tests became really slow, very brittle and flaky. So tons of asynchronicity issues. So we switched to an Ember-only way of testing things. So now there's been a lot of focus on testing in the Ember community lately, and there's all this very nice framework. All these helpers that are actually really smart, that deal with asynchronicity for you. You can also write your own helpers. So it's become really easy to do this. So one issue I have, so when you move your testing suite from your backend to your front end, the problem is that you can't really see your data. So as I said, we test the whole stack. So we actually do perform the API request to the backend. So just JavaScript fixtures won't work. So imagine you want to test the show route of one of your resources. How'd you do that? So the way we do it is we simply set up an API endpoint, CDB for instance, which will reset your database before each test and create the models in your backend that you show in your front end during the testing. So be careful if you use this, do not open it in production because it will reset your database, so you don't want anyone running this in production. So quickly gonna show how this works. So I have a very simple application, which just it's like this blog post application. So you can create a blog post, and then you hit there. You can see it issues a post request to the backend, and then it jumps to the show action of your show route of your resource. So it shows the title and shows the content. So we're going to test that. We're going to go straight. We're going to create a blog post in the backend, and then going straight to this show route in the test. Okay. All right. So yeah, you can see this is ugly non-ES6 code. So a lot of globals. I apologize for that. So in the setup, so this is uses QUnit. So this setup function is run before every test that we run. So first we want to hold the test. We're going to perform some asynchronous action. So we're going to stop the test. Then we're going to defer the readiness of the application, of the Ember app. So what that does is it tells Ember, like, don't boot up this application yet, because we're gonna tell you when you can continue booting it. So then we do the request to this CDB endpoint. So I use a small library called IC Ajax, which simply wraps your jQuery promises into Ember promises. And then if everything goes all right, we get the ID of the blog post, because we need that to be able to go to the correct route in the show route. And then we tell, okay, Ember, you can go on booting the application, and we can start testing. So these are the actual tests. So first we visit the URL. So it's like URL is a function, because the problem is that when we first load this code, we don't know what the ID is of the blog post, because we only get it back once we do CDB. So that's why it's a function. It dynamically, kind of runtime gets it. And then we simply check, okay, is the title there, and is the content there. So let me show you how that works. So this is a test suite. Can you guys see this? Okay, so you see that first it issues this call to the CDB endpoint, and then it goes to the route. So it resolves the model, and then moves on going to actually doing the transition. And then for the second test, it does exactly the same. So yeah. So it's a lightning talk, so it was really short. Just a small trick that made it easier for me. So I guess you can't make a presentation without having a slide about hiring. Yeah, so I mean, we're early stage. So at the moment we have 4 full-time people working on it. We've got 2 interns as well. And we're starting to get some traction. And we recently got access to some funding. So for now, I've built the whole application myself, because I'm the only technical person on the team. But we're looking for an experienced Rails and Ember developer to join our team. So you can reach me on email, Twitter, or I'm sure if you want to, you can find a way to reach me. So that's it.
Anybody have a question for Yoram? Okay.